Pickleball. So feel free at any time to grab some food and coffee that's still going throughout. Today, just to give you an idea of what you'll experience, first of all, my name is Joy Cover. I've met, I think, many of you. I'm president of Freedom 424. I'll share a little bit about what who we are in a moment. But for now, my name is Joy. And there's another Joy here. That's right. Today, we're going to share a little bit about our organization, what we do, and why it's important what we do. And then we have a pickleball specialist here to teach us something about pickleball, and then a demonstration afterwards. So I hope you all are energized and ready to go. That's why we brought those carbs for you, so you can carb load before the pickleball. So get ready. Before we get into any of the content, there's two things I'd like to share with you. First of all, we would love to keep in touch with you. We have an opportunity to sign up for an email list. We won't load up your box with emails, we promise. It's more informative, like if we have a newsletter we send out once a quarter, so you know and can continue to walk with us, which I know you all will want to after you hear what we have to say. So I expect a mad rush to the table over there for email signups. Also, the content that I'm going to share can be challenging. What we do as an organization when we talk about human trafficking, it's not a fun topic. So I'm not going to assume that this room is devoid of trauma, and many of you, some of you may have experienced trauma of your own. So if anything I or any of the speakers say just is a bit much, you have the freedom at any moment to leave, take a breath, recenter, because we recognize that we live in a world that has hurts and challenges, and that we have been affected and scarred by those. So we need to take care of ourselves. So just be aware, some of the content we might share might be hard to hear. So with that, I'm going to get started. So again, I'm Joy Cover with Freedom 424. We're an anti-trafficking organization based here in Lynchburg, Virginia. We have the mission to prevent and end sexual exploitation and human trafficking, both locally and globally. And a lot of times when people hear about human trafficking, they automatically get the ideas of what has been shared in media or in Hollywood, and a lot of those things are incorrect. So one of our main focuses is to help people understand what actually is happening in the world of human trafficking, that it's not something that's just overseas that doesn't impact us. It's actually something that's impacting our own community here in Lynchburg, Virginia, which is quite alarming when you think about it, because it's scary. So we want to educate people about what human trafficking is so that we can protect ourselves, our communities, our children, our grandchildren. Because if we have the education to know what it looks like actually, then we can arm and equip ourselves to make sure it never happens in our lives, in our families. So let me just give you a few statistics about human trafficking. Hold these lightly because, again, when we're talking about human trafficking, this is not something that's out in the open that we can see. I think we all probably can recognize a homeless person. You see them on the street. They're right there in front of you. Oh, that person doesn't have a home. But when we're talking about human trafficking, that's something that can be hidden, and it's not visible if you don't know what to look for. So right now, there's an estimated 40 million individuals worldwide impacted by human trafficking. And when we say the word human trafficking, that means a couple different things. It means commercial sex. It means labor trafficking. So it's an umbrella term for different things. It can, and within those categories, for example, commercial sex, that can be people who are forced to have sex in exchange for something of value. It can mean forced prostitution, forced escort services, pornography. All of these things fall within commercial sex. And then forced labor, it's people forced to conduct labor services. So there's a big, huge, long official definition for human trafficking. I'm not going to share that with you. This is the overview. Human trafficking is anytime force, fraud, or coercion is used to manipulate someone's vulnerabilities to exploit them in exchange for something of value. So I'm going to say that again. It's anytime force, fraud, or coercion is used to manipulate someone, to exploit someone for something of value. Now, Freedom 424, we specifically deal with sex trafficking. And again, this is where the hard conversations come in. Nobody wants to talk about sex, but it's happening. So right now, there's roughly 4 million adults impacted by sex trafficking and 1 million children. According to the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children, in 2020, 21.7 online child exploitation reports were reported to that tip line. And just to tell you, the online child exploitation, well, what is that? That is any suspected online enticement of children for sexual acts. That's child sex trafficking. That's child sexual abuse material and child sex tourism. And I always get the question, what is child sex tourism? That's when people travel to have sex with kids. It's horrible. So there were, again, 21.7 million reports to the tip line, the National Center for Missing and Exploited tip line in 2020. So I'm just trying to paint a national, international picture of what this looks like. So we just have a general idea. Now I'm going to share a Freedom 424 video with you, and we'll continue.
If you were to explore the timeline of human trafficking, you would see we all begin at a place of innocence. But no matter where we live, what family we're born into, our race or gender, we are all vulnerable to exploitation as we grow in a world where good and evil exist side by side. Exploitation hides in the normalcy of everyday life. However, there are crucial red flags before exploitation and human trafficking occur. These red flags on the timeline act as cautions for potential victims. But if we don't understand these warnings and identify them as such, there's nothing to signal a threat. Instead, the traffickers remain disguised as friends, romantic interests, or caring family members. Traffickers display a pattern of manipulation known as grooming. They start by identifying the victim's vulnerabilities in order to gain their trust. When trust is built and manipulation is normalized, traffickers begin to exploit. And this is where human trafficking occurs. Each one of us walks along this timeline. We all have vulnerabilities that can be exploited, but many factors determine how far we have to walk. Some are fortunate enough to never come face to face with exploitation. Others come close but recognize the red flags, and others, through no fault of their own, face one of the darkest injustices in the world. During any point in this timeline, Freedom 424 is providing hope. Our evidence-based and trauma-informed prevention education is designed to stop exploitation before it ever takes place. It equips parents to have ongoing conversations with their children. It teaches youth how to protect themselves relationally, both online and offline, and it educates communities to identify and report human trafficking. And when human trafficking does occur, our carefully vetted partners, both locally and globally, are walking alongside survivors during their restoration journey as they provide spiritual, emotional, and physical healing. These partners are dedicated to shifting the narrative from survivor to thriver for those impacted by human trafficking, so that cycles of abuse are ended and hope-filled trajectories are started. There is room for hope throughout the entire timeline. We need to be in the moments both before and after trafficking occurs, prevention and restoration, restoring the lives of those who have been touched by this evil while working hard to ensure it does not affect another. This is the mission of Freedom 424.
All right. So that gives you a general understanding of Freedom 424 and why we're so passionate about fighting against human trafficking. Again, we are here to prevent and end human trafficking and exploitation. And our main focus as an organization is on the prevention side, to stop the exploitation before it ever starts. If we can equip people to recognize it, then we can help put an end to it. So, we get the question, how does it happen? And the video addresses that a little bit. First of all, who is a trafficker? How does this even happen? Well, what we want people to understand, and one of the myths that we really combat, is that a trafficker can be anyone. It's not the creepy guy in the Target store who's following someone. It's not, what you envision through Hollywood depictions. A trafficker can be anyone. It can be a family member. Our partner in West Virginia, they share with us that the main problem they experience there is family members trafficking their kids to support their drug habits. So family members are a main way that people are trafficked. Another main way is through romantic relationships or romantic partners. So a boyfriend, a girlfriend, a husband, a wife. I know a trafficking survivor, her husband trafficked her. So what we want people to understand, and what is so often misunderstood, is we think when we see, it's abduction, it's kidnapping, it's stealing off, it's transporting from one country to another. While those things could be a part of trafficking, it's a very small percentage. I think kidnapping and abduction, it's maybe like 2 or 3% of the time. The majority of the time, what happens is the manipulation of a relationship. It's grooming for the purpose of exploitation. And over 90% of the time, a trafficking victim knew their trafficker before they were trafficked. So it could be that a trafficker identifies a vulnerability in somebody and uses that information to manipulate them. Some of those vulnerabilities could include previous sexual abuse. Think about that. So many people, especially nowadays, have sexual abuse as part of their history. That makes them more vulnerable to being trafficked. Relational poverty. What do I mean by relational poverty? That means you don't have a community of support around you. You don't have the love that you need. How many of us want to be loved and cared for? Right? Okay. Think about teens today and being in that position. Do you think they want to be loved and cared for? Yes, this is a common thing that we all share. This is something that traffickers can identify. I think kids use, especially because the internet is so prevalent in our culture, kids can put all their information out there and they can share all of their needs and all of their vulnerabilities. This is then identified by people who are specifically wanting to use that against those kids to profit off of them. So if a kid says, man, I hate my mom, I wish somebody understood me, ding, 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 that is a flag. That's putting information out there to let them know. So think about your kids and your grandkids and some of the things that they do as we continue, because this is why we're here, to help educate. So that's what happens. The vulnerability is identified and manipulated for the point of trafficking. That trust is built through grooming, and then exploitation occurs. So at this point, I'd love to invite Sharon Steitler. She is the VP, the Vice President of Member Experience and Corporate Partners at the YMCA, and she's also a Freedom 424 board member. So I'd like her to come up and share a little bit about her experience. Thanks, Sharon.
Hi guys, how are you doing? So a lot of times we think that this happens to someone else, but it didn't. It happened to me. And I had a granddaughter that actually, this happened June 27th of 2022, so it hasn't been but about not even a year. She loved playing games, and you can play games online, and you can invite people to play with you. And it was somewhat monitored for her, but it's so easy to just get involved in your game. So she kind of started pulling away from her friends, and she met somebody online that she was gaming with, and she was spending a lot of time there. Well, one day we got a note saying that she was missing, and that was the 27th of June, and she had thought this person was going to sweep her off her feet. She was 15 years old, and he had groomed her, and she has a good family, okay? He had groomed her to the point of he came down from Michigan, picked her up out of the house, and she just thought she was going to live this great life because the fantasy of gaming, the fantasy of this guy really cares about me, and gosh, I have to, my great-grandma doesn't understand me, my mom doesn't understand me, and she's a good girl. And she ended up going to Michigan with this guy, but we thought she was going to California because that was the note that was left. first thing I did is I called my son. I said, how in the world could this happen? And, can you get to different things in her profile? Can you help me? But the second call I made was to Joy. Joy had all the resources in place, including state troopers and local enforcement, and they were able to track her down in 3 days and go to Michigan, worked with Michigan, and they were able to bring her back home. She went through a lot during that time. Her life was threatened. The conditions that she was in were very poor, dead cats in the house and little kids crawling around in muck. But she was saved, so she was not trafficked, but she was right at that flag that we were talking about. But she thought she was going with a friend because she had connected online. And our grandchildren and children, that is real. I don't know if you know how much your social media influences our young people, but it does. So that's the education. It's not across the sea. It was somebody that was a 19-year-old from Michigan. I really believe it was the uncle that had the trafficking within the home, because it just seemed like he was used as a pawn from his uncle. However, if it hadn't been for the education, me working with youth every single day at the YMCA and watching teens come in and be lost, and some of them, just wanting somewhere to be, and I'm so glad the Y is there to be that influence. My education of sexual abuse prevention through the Y, and somebody like Joy that I believe in and have partnered with her many times with the Y on her Run for the Lives that's coming up April 21st. Just knowing the signs, I was able to act quickly. And I want you to be able to act quickly if something would happen to your grandchildren or your great-grandchildren or your children. And so that's my story, and the education is so important. And a lot of times it does start online for our kids. They're in their room more, especially through COVID. They were alone, and that was their only outlet. They couldn't even be with their friends. And I think that has really increased the chances of kids and their dependency on their phone and their gaming and their social media. So I hope that this helps you a little bit understand that it can happen to you. It happened to me, and I come from a good family, and she comes from a good family, and we love our kids very much and our grandkids very much. But it's something that is real, and we just want you to be educated about that. Okay? Do y'all have any questions? Is there anything you wanted me to say that? Okay. So thanks for listening to me today, and we'll finish the program.
Yeah. Thank you, Sharon. Thanks for being vulnerable and sharing that personal story. And isn't it interesting in Sharon's testimony, it wasn't her granddaughter, it wasn't a stranger to her. This was someone that she'd been building a relationship for, I think, 6 weeks, a couple months. And so this was someone she knew that she had met online and then made plans to meet offline. So for her, and what's important is this guy didn't come to kidnap her. What we need to be aware of is not the people coming in to take kids out of our home, but who our kids are leaving the home willingly to meet because of who they've met online. And either those relationships may stay online and turn into exploitation, or like Sharon's granddaughter, it morphs offline into face-to-face interaction, and it can become dangerous. And it's all it's all the manipulation of a relationship, but now we have the added factor of the internet and social media that makes kids more accessible to predators. Instagram alone has 1 billion users. So if your grandchild is on Instagram and they don't have those safety settings in place, 1 billion people have access to your grandkids and can see everything that they put out there. That's just Instagram. I mean, there's so many other things, the gaming world is a whole other thing. So just to give you an idea of right here in our area in Central Virginia, Based on the Internet Crimes Against Children Task Force right here in Bedford, in 2021, we had 189 offender arrests, so people trying to exploit our kids. 89 children were rescued that were impacted by suspected online enticement. So again, just to define that, that's children for people enticing children for sexual acts, child sex trafficking, child sexual abuse material, and child sex tourism. So 89 children, those were the ones that they were able to identify and rescue. In 2021, there were 2,000 child victims throughout our state. So if you have the misconception that it's not happening here, that's incorrect. It's happening here. And so we need to be equipped, and we need to equip our children. And that's what brings me to the next portion of our program. What is Freedom 424 doing about it? How are we preventing exploitation? So I have a special treat for you. Jill Budimir, our curriculum developer, actually lives in Croatia. But she came in person all the way here to talk to you today. So you have a special gift. She's here in person to share what Freedom 424 is doing through our prevention education curriculum for our youth. So Jill, come on up. All the way from Croatia, Jill Budimir.
I'm not jet lagged anymore. So, yeah, I'm a teacher and I have a mental health background. So it's a perfect combination to make curriculum for human trafficking prevention. So I've been working with a team for about 1.5 years to create our own lessons that can go into the schools. It could go into nonprofits, can go into churches. You know, it's made for youth to hear and to learn, right? Because we believe that when they know the facts and that they're aware, they know what's a trafficker, who is that, what does it look like, who are the victims. It's, you know, we're following Virginia standards to kind of guide what we can expose kids to, because you're like, oh my gosh, we don't want our young kids to hear this, right? But we do know that young kids should know what is a healthy relationship. And that's what we started with, actually. So our first lesson is geared for this upper elementary age about healthy relationships. Because if 90% of trafficking is connected to a relationship, and the kids know their trafficker because they're in their family, or they're, you know, a boyfriend, or it's an acquaintance that they met somehow, we need them to know early on, what does it mean to recognize if the relationship is turning manipulative or doesn't feel right anymore. And so, you know, we're teaching them how to scan their body and trust themselves for that uh-oh feeling, and then what to do, right? So it's focusing on boundaries and consent, and having lots of scenarios for the kids, like, what would you do if this happened to you, or if somebody is asking you this type of inappropriate question? So the kids think in these lessons, and then they kind of role play. And so there's this activity part of it where the kids get to think through how they would respond and what to do. In the 6th grade and above, we really get into the trafficking content. And I'm actually here also to help make the educational videos for the lessons, where we have experts sharing with them, you know, law enforcement and some survivors. So the kids are learning through these lessons in a way that will have them engaged, because we don't want them to just sit and then leave and not think about it, but interacting together, role playing, and the facilitators that are teaching the lessons are equipped with information that is provided in a way that's trauma informed. And what that means is they're very aware that there will be kids in the room that have experienced abuse. And so this is why Freedom 424 is writing our own curriculum, because we want it to be written and actually administered in a way that pays really close attention to those trauma triggers that kids will have, and to equip the facilitators to know what to do. So basically we are also, one other point about the curriculum that we're really passionate about, from even just what you heard today, is absolutely focusing on online safety. So every single lesson has online safety in it, from 4th grade up to 12th grade, because they're experiencing the internet in ways that's actually really important to them. We don't want to just shut it down, right, and say, don't go on the internet. Like, that's not really the answer. We need to teach them, and they hear this a lot in schools in reality, but to actually have them really keenly aware of what to do to protect themselves. And then, part of exploitation actually in the high school tends to also go towards the texting, and then it turns into, if they're in a romantic relationship, into sexting, where it becomes sexual texting, and then that's used as blackmail, and it lures in with that new vulnerability. So, raising awareness for kids at how dangerous that is, because it's becoming more prevalent. So, and often when a teenager really sits and thinks about it, and they're not, making poor decisions because their brains aren't fully developed, when they really sit and think about it, and that's what the educational part does, they're like, yeah, that's not smart, and I don't want to do that. And so they are able to and then also, who are the trusted adults that I can go to if I'm getting stuck? So, I, as an educator, I was really aware of like the child abuse hotline, because we were all trained, right? And I was really aware of the suicide hotline. It wasn't until I was with Freedom 424 that I realized there's a human trafficking hotline. And that's what actually is really, for anyone that suspects that there's something not right going on, that there's a human trafficking hotline too. And there's a hotline for sextortion, which is that texting. So there's one just for kids that are getting themselves stuck in a really unsafe situation where they really are so ashamed of what's happening. So there's help out there, that part of the education is helping the kids know what to do, and helping the teachers know, right? Because they're with the kids. And actually I'm looking at you all thinking, okay, well, you're hearing this, you might be a little more removed from this on all of this that kids are facing, but you all can be at least like, yeah, these are the hotlines, this is the help that's out there. Even if you just remember Freedom 424, like, we're a resource, right? So reference an organization like this to help connect the right person to the help that's out there. So, and if you hear that there's a lesson that's in the schools, be like, yeah, that's really good. It's good that you listen to that, because it's out there. So even just the support behind it going into the schools, because it is in the Virginia standards in the Department of Education, but it's not required. So I was a teacher in Virginia, and we did it in my school, but not everybody is enforcing it, because there's all the other things to teach. There's math and reading standards. So to actually say, yeah, this is important, it's 2 days of lessons for 6th grade. Those are important lessons. So, I really think that the more people that are aware, the more we can advocate to get it out there and to put it in. And now, we're going to be done with our curriculum in June. So it's going to be ready to be piloted through the whole fall. We're really ready to get it into the schools here first thing. So yeah, it's exciting. It's really great to be here and to share with you all. So I'll hand this back over to Joy.
All right, thank you, Jill. So again, our heart is prevention, because we want to protect our kids. We will be piloting our curriculum this fall to Central Virginia. And just to give you an idea, the state police has a human trafficking unit that was set up last year specifically to deal with human trafficking in our state. And so the state police has divided our state into 7 regions, and there is an agent assigned to each of those regions. For our region, Region 3, the special agent from that human trafficking unit assigned to us reported in our Freedom 424 board meeting a few weeks ago that for our region in Region 3, if they hired 10 people to do the job that he's doing, they still would have enough work to keep them so busy. in this issue of human trafficking. And that 50% of the cases they deal with involve children. So this is in our region. I implemented some prevention education to a group of middle and high school girls a few weeks ago, and we do pre-post testing to test their knowledge. This is girls from our area. Some of the questions were, how do you protect yourselves from online predators? So many of them answered the question, if you let the predator know you're a minor, they'll leave you alone. Is that true? They're being targeted because they're a minor. This is the level of education. Like, we have to protect our kids because they are the future. They are the people who are going to be leading and, healthy community members, hopefully. And that's what we want to have and be part of. And this is why each of you has a role to play in this. We all have a role to play in actually understanding what human trafficking is so that we can stop the exploitation before it ever becomes a part of their story. And all of you can be a part of that. So thank you for listening to this today. And I would like to open the floor to any questions. If you do have a question, please wait until I can get to you with a microphone so that we can have the sound heard. We did such a great job. There are no questions. Yeah, Jean, hold on. Oh, here.
I'd just like to know if the school systems have agreed to take your program and run with it.
Great question. So we are, for the fall, we have a goal of piloting this to 1,500 students, and right now we're in communication. The Appomattox County school system for their middle and high school students wants us to pilot it. And we have some other leads from schools in our area who previously, they were gonna allow us to come in for prevention education, and then COVID hit and everything shut down, so we're picking up those conversations. But part of this conversation and where you guys can, as leaders in the community, you can encourage Lynchburg City Schools to help us get this into our school systems. Obviously, we have to do it. We have to make sure we have enough staff hired, all of those things to be able to do it, so that's why we have a goal of 1,500. But our goal is pilot it to those 1,500, tighten up the programming, and then roll it out across the state in 2024 and beyond. So we're not keeping it here. We want to reach the whole country, but we're starting with Virginia and our own community.
And there are arrests right in Lynchburg and Bedford for these traffickers going on. Arrests? Yes, they are making arrests of traffickers.
Yes, they are making, so Jean was asking, are there arrests? So those statistics I quoted, we don't have updated for this year, but the ones that I quoted were for 2021. It was, I think, from January through September of 2021, they had so far 189 arrests, offender arrests. And that was for the Central Virginia Task Force. And within that time span, again, 89 children who were identified victims. So that was just not even the full year of 2021. And we get our data, we work closely with ICAC, Internet Crimes Against Children. So they're just looking at the online, which is the most important, but online minors who are being exploited.
Are you guys seeing a lot of teenage boys being victimized?
That's such a good question. So it's not as widely reported, but it doesn't mean it's not happening. There was a news article I have often shared where there was a 16-year-old boy who was on Minecraft, and somebody contacted him through all gaming platforms. All video games have a peer-to-peer function where you can privately chat people, and that's how some of these relationships start. So this boy was playing Minecraft, and somebody reached out to him, built a relationship. It's that whole grooming process where he was talking, and then the guy came and picked this boy up and took him to Florida, and there he was held in a trailer and abused and raped. There was another boy there too. And so boys are not exempt. There's a lot of stigma around that, especially if there's fear that you might be identified as in the LGBTQ plus community if you're a male and you're abused, and maybe they are a part of that community, which is another risk factor on top of that. But there's just a lot of stigma around that. Additionally, boys are tough. They shouldn't be abused, right? This, again, so many misconceptions about this. Boys can be victims. They are targeted. Another scenario, there was a previous curriculum we used. They shared a story about a boy who was exchanging what are those cards for, I can't remember that. Pokemon, thank you. Pokemon cards. And he was connecting with a 15-year-old girl, and it wasn't a 15-year-old girl. So it's just the kids have interests, and people connect with them through those interests and use that as an opportunity to build a relationship and then keep that online for exploitation. Send me an inappropriate photo. That photo goes on porn sites, and it's abused that way, or it goes offline and continues that way. So great question, and we are very aware that boys are part of this. Anything else before I introduce the man of the hour? Okay, well, we will be here. We will be pickleballing too. So if you have any questions and you just want to connect with one of the staff, we're here to answer this. So I would like to introduce Andrew Yu. Hold on one second. I'm pulling up his bio here. So Andrew, current vice president of racket sports at Cross-White Athletic Club. Andrew has been teaching pickleball since 2021 and tennis since 2007. Although born and raised in Lynchburg, Virginia, he developed his passion for coaching in Northern Virginia while working at the front desk at a large racket club during his attendance at George Mason University. After being asked to help feed tennis balls for the junior program, he gained more and more knowledge of the game through teaching and through his coworkers, and eventually became a full-time teaching pro. Andrew has always been a big participant of many sports outside tennis and really got into pickleball after moving back to Lynchburg in 2019. Being gone from his hometown for so long, pickleball was the most accessible sport he could find. After the first couple times playing, he got hooked, just like most people. With his passion being a tennis coach, it was just natural that he wanted to start teaching pickleball, so when the window of opportunity to coach appeared at Cross-White, he jumped on it. He loves pickleball because it's a sport for everyone. Andrew Yu, come on up.
Test. All right. Thank you, Freedom 424, for having me, and Westminster as well. I am the pickleball pro at Cross-White Athletic Club. Has everyone tried pickleball before? Who has played pickleball? Raise your hand. Nice, good amount of you. All right. Who has never heard of pickleball ever? All right, it's a weird name, right? So there are lots of rules for pickleball, all right, and that's going to be probably for another day, right? So that's probably the most complicated part of pickleball, the rules and the scoring, all right. But I brought some equipment for everyone to kind of take a look at. So this is a pickleball paddle. Right. So there are a lot of different ones. I didn't bring any of the older ones, which is like just plywood, right? But here's a pickleball paddle, right? And here's a pickleball, right? So it's a plastic ball with holes in it. So it actually doesn't travel very fast, and it's not going to bounce very high, okay? So if I just drop this ball, right, you'll see how low I have to get to try to hit that ball. But I will pass these paddles around for you guys to take a look at, and one of these balls. All right, so, but I'm gonna keep one of these paddles. All right, so if you guys wanna take a look at a paddle, ball. So it's like a wiffle ball. Yeah, so, and there are different type of balls for different surfaces. There's gonna be an outdoor ball and an indoor ball, but the outdoor ball is just really for the tennis court surface. So if you're playing indoors with the tennis court, right, you want to use an outdoor ball, right? If it's indoor balls are softer, all right, with bigger holes and less holes, right? So they're going to travel a little bit slower, but also they're going to be a little bouncier as well, right? So pass some of these paddles around. Tell us about the different types of rackets. There's so many different types. You even see this one has holes in it. This one's actually illegal, so you can't use it. You can't use it in a sanctioned tournament, right? But you guys can take a look at this one as well. So if you want to pass some of these around as well, right? But the pickleball paddles, right? Actually, the game has evolved so much lately, right? So a lot more spin, right? a lot more power, right? So everyone's hitting these balls harder, right, and spinnier, right? So these paddles just kind of aid in that, right? But let me borrow a paddle. If you guys want to take a look at a ball, here you go. All right, so the first thing is kind of how you hold the paddle. Everyone can hold it in any type of way, right? There's no right or wrong way to hold the paddle, right? I just like a neutral grip, right? So we call this continental grip, right? And it's a neutral grip. So if it's over here towards my backhand, right, it's a little pretty square, right? And if I turn it over here, it's also square. But if I turn it to a different grip, paddle face is pointing down, and on this side, it's really open, right? So I'll just have to really turn my wrist all over the place. So that's why I use this continental grip, okay? But the grip is not gonna be too important, right? So just whatever you're comfortable with, just kind of however you grab it when you first grab a pickleball paddle, right? So the one thing about, I showed you guys the ball already, the ball, right? Thank you, right? So it doesn't bounce very high, right? It travels pretty slow, right? So knowing that, these balls are going to be really low, okay? So what I'm going to show you guys first is just a good ready position, okay? Honestly, I'm very lazy in pickleball, right? So very casual with it, right? But so I'm kind of standing like this, right? But you don't want to be like this, right? Because some of you guys, right, will like to hit balls hard, right? And you will try to hit people, right? So in tennis, right, it's a little frowned upon to kind of try to hit somebody. Pickleballers do it all the time, all right? I already see some red in some of you guys' eyes, right? Ready to target people, right? But again, these balls travel kind of slow and really low. So a good ready position, right, is kind of getting low to the ground, okay? So you want to be, well, if you guys want to stand up a little bit, if I can show you guys, right? So everyone's stand up, right? So just a little bend in your knees, right? Because all these balls are going to be pretty low, okay? So the best people that I've seen play defense in pickleball, right, are these former LU Liberty hockey players, right? They're ridiculous at digging balls out, right? Because they get so low, right? They're like out here, I can't even do it, right? So they get really low. So you want to stay low, okay? So the other thing too, right? If you're very high up, right, and you're trying to get a low ball, right, you're gonna fall over. You're gonna lose your balance, right? So there's this one meme that's going out about pickleballers, right? It's a pickleballer in an office or a doctor's office, right? And the doctor's like, you just got done playing pickleball, right? Because there's a lot of injuries with pickleball if you're very high up, right? So just make sure you guys stay nice and low, okay? So even if you guys want to grab a paddle, so yeah, I get my paddle low as well. So sorry, I didn't bring enough paddles for everyone, but so that's kind of the ready position, okay? You guys can have a seat now if you like, but all right, so nice and low, okay? So the pickleball court is pretty small, right? But does not mean you don't want to move just as much, right, as like in tennis. Anyone have racket sports background, tennis, any tennis players, right, racquetball, right? So it's a little bit easier than tennis because you don't have as much court to cover, right? And the ball's a little bit slower, right? But just like in tennis or any racket sport, right, you want to try to react with your feet first, right? So I'll be able to cover a lot more ground with my feet, okay? So whenever I'm in my ready position, I'm ready to attack with my feet, okay? So ready to move. I don't want to be out here reaching, okay? So that's just your ready position, all right? So it's a little difficult without explaining some of the rules. So, well, I'll tell you guys the basic rules, right? The ones you really need to know, right? And the ones that I see get broken all the time, right? A lot of cheaters out there, right? So, so the first rule that you'll really have to know, right, is just kind of the start of the point, the serve. Okay, so there are a few rules for the serve, right? But there are two different ways that you can serve. Okay, one's going to be a little easier than the other, right? But there's a volley serve. So it's just a serve that you hit out of the air. Okay, so if you hit the ball out of the air for a serve, the paddle has to be below your waist on contact, right? But it also has to be below your wrists on contact, right? And then you also have to be swinging in the upwards direction, right? So if I hit the ball like this on a serve, illegal, right? So if I hit the ball like this on a serve, it's also illegal because it's not below my waist, okay? So, all right, so if I serve, right, I just got to make sure I'm right here. So I'm going to hit it nice and lightly. All right, here you go. So that'll be a serve, okay? So a volley serve, okay? The other one is a bounce serve, okay? So if I hit it off of a bounce, I can hit it however I like, right? So that one's a little bit easier, right? But again, this ball doesn't bounce very high, okay? So, and sometimes with this plastic ball, right, it can warp a little bit. You might have some flat spots or a couple bumps on it. So the bounce might just bounce away from you sometimes, right? So, but if I bounce it, right, I can hit it however I want, right? So I can be here, right, and I can hit high to low, above my waist, whatever I need to do. The only rule with that, I can't assist the bounce, right? I can't throw it down, nor can I throw it up, right? I just have to let go of it. Yeah, so no momentum for the toss, okay? So that's the serving rule, right? After the serving rule is the two bounce rule, right? The two bounce rule just means the first two shots in the point have to bounce, okay? So it just has to bounce on one side and then it has to bounce on the other side. After that, anything goes, okay? So tip for the serve, after you serve, right, I have to let my next ball bounce, my next shot bounce. So I see this all the time. They'll serve and then they'll start running in, right? But you have to let the next ball bounce. So if they hit that ball deep, right, you might want to take that ball out of the air, right? But you can't, right? So make sure after you serve, right, just stay back behind the line, okay? All right. So on the other side, the return of serve, okay? When you're returning, you have the advantage, right? The returning side has the advantage in pickleball, right? Because they can get up to the net first. After they hit that first ball, you can start running up, right? Your opponents have to let that next ball bounce, right? So everything is going to be a lot easier the closer to the net you guys are, right? So those of you who have played pickleball, you guys know about the kitchen. All right, so those of you who have not heard about pickleball, there's a kitchen, right? So kitchen, the more technical term for it is the non-volley zone, okay? So the non-volley zone is a 7-foot space between the net, right? Well, behind the net on either side. So 7 feet on one side, 7 feet on the other side. So it's a non-volley zone. So the volley is just a shot that you hit out of the air, right? So you just can't hit any balls out of the air in that zone. Okay, so that's kind of the last rule that you really need to know, right? But again, back to the returning side, right? So you have the advantage. So after you return, you want to start running up to that kitchen, right? So I do that daily. I'm just running to that fridge, looking for some snacks or whatever it is, right? So, so just make sure after you hit that ball, right, run up, right? Also getting closer to the nets, right? Then you have less court to have to cover, right? So the further back I am, the more space I have to cover, so the more moving I have to do, right? I already told you guys I'm a little lazy, right? So I like getting up there, then all I have to cover is that little 7-foot zone, right? Yeah, they can hit that ball over me, and that's going to happen often, right? But that's a little bit more difficult to do, right? So, so it's harder for them to get the ball kind of over me than to try to get it by me, right? So around me. So always trying to make sure you're getting up to the kitchen, right? So that's kind of the one thing everyone starting off in pickleball will be a little hesitant on, right? But the more you play, the more you want to try to start working your way up to that kitchen, okay? So once we're at the kitchen, right, volleys. So again, volley is just any shot I take out of the air, right? For volleys, I always want to try to make contact out in the front, Okay, so a tip for volleys, right? Still want to get low if I can, right? But I will start out in front of me. So I don't want balls coming close to me, right? First of all, it gets a little scary, right? So when someone's hitting that ball hard, this is what I'm going to want to do, right? But I got to fight that, right? I got to make sure I'm keeping contact out in front of me, right? So the second reason why I want to do that, right? I can't do much here. This is a little bit of a weaker shot, right? Out here, right, I can do more. I can punch that ball, right? So I can do a punch volley, right? And that's going to be a nice basic volley for you guys. Any high volley, we'll just punch it, right? So punch, right? So those are just a few kind of basic tips, right? I'll show you guys some more once we get on the court, right? But do we have any questions so far about anything that we've done or we talked about? Yes.
Rushing up to the net,
Yes.
watching all those players on the YouTube and stuff. Most of us don't have the same reflexes.
Yeah, so you want to do, I'll always tell my students, do whatever is comfortable for you, right? So if you don't have the reflexes, or if you're a little more timid up there, right, just stay back, right? But you will have a lot more success further up than further back, right? The game is so much easier at the net, regardless of kind of your reflexes, right? But if you are a little scared up there, it's totally okay, right? Just start a little bit further back, right? Or, right, you'll see a lot of people have some eyewear, right? They have some protective some goggles, right? I've seen someone with a helmet, right? All right, so, but good question, right? But the better you get to at pickleball, right, the more you want to start looking to, it's won more at the kitchen, right? It's lost more from further back, right? Points, right? Good question. Anyone else? Any questions? Yes.
Do you think a tennis shoe is the best kind of shoe?
Depends on, yeah, for all around, yes, right? But you want to be wherever you play the most, right? So I play mostly on a tennis court, right? And more competitive players like playing on the tennis court. So you want tennis court shoes, but those are just fine. Tennis courts will also work on basketball gym surfaces. So most places will either be on a tennis court or like a hardwood or rubbery. So like at Jamerson, they have a little bit more rubbery surface on the basketball court. Tennis shoes would be perfect for that as well. Tennis shoes, the traction, very similar to basketball shoes. So that's why it's going to be okay in the gym surface as well. But tennis shoes, right, it's good, it's designed for kind of some speed, but also that lateral movement too. It's a lot of lateral movement. So if you're wearing like some basic running shoes, you're just going in a straight line, right? So it's not going to have that lateral support, nor is it going to have kind of the durability for the soles too, because they'll wear a lot on the tennis court surface. But it's really mostly for that lateral movement, the lateral support. All right. Any other questions?
Did you say that the balls for playing inside should have the big holes?
Yeah, so if you are playing on a surface that is not a tennis court, right, they have bigger holes. I wish I brought one. I don't think I have one. No, I don't. Okay, yeah, so it has bigger holes and less holes, right? So it just travels a little bit slower, but it's a little bit bouncier as well. So these are harder, right, with smaller holes and more holes, right? So this is more like a tournament ball. So any high-level tournament, this is actually the ball they use. Yeah. So you guys will be using these balls soon, right? All right. All right. Any other questions? Well, you guys ready to get out there and start playing? All right. All right.